So there's one big reason why I think Michael Jackson was innocent, and that's simply that if he really was guilty of all the things that they say he did, why would parents then keep sending kids to stay over at Michael Jackson's house? It simply wouldn't have happened. So we'll get down to the main reasons why I and other people still believe Michael Jackson is innocent. First of all, make sure you subscribe to my channel so I can continue making these great videos, and more followers spreads the word and just gives me more opportunities to make great content for you. So, have you ever read the book by Randy J. Tabarelli about Michael Jackson's life? If you read this book, you'll see that his biographer, who spent years writing this book and knew Michael Jackson since he was a teenager, he himself felt that Michael Jackson could never have done any of the things which people accused him of. For a start, he always felt that Michael Jackson, although he did have a childhood, never had a normal childhood like other people. And therefore, as much as it was a fun childhood, going all around the world with the Jackson 5, having everything you wanted, Michael Jackson just never had limits in the same way that normal children would have done. So for him, when he eventually bought the Neverland Ranch, that was a continuation of all the fun he had as a child. Second reason why I don't think Michael Jackson did it is because, aside from a few rare cases, there have been hardly any reports of anything going on in all the time that Michael Jackson had children over to stay at the ranch. If he really had been abusing children for many years, we simply would have found out about it. There were far too many opportunities for children to tell their parents and for their parents to tell the media. What in fact did happen is that in 1993, one main high-profile case involved a boy called Jordy Chandler. Now, the interesting thing about Jordy Chandler is the boy, who is now an adult, signed a non-disclosure agreement, so he's never been able to say anything about what happened as an adult. But let it be known that Jordy Chandler did go under a drug which his father, as a dentist, had prescribed to him. This drug had a purpose as to be a kind of truth serum. Now, although this has been debunked, there are theories that suggest that perhaps when the boy was giving testimony about what happened, he wasn't remembering correctly, and he remembered some memories that had been falsely implanted. But what do you think anyway? Do you think this boy who had a good relationship with Michael Jackson would then simply want to turn around and accuse him of child abuse? Or was it simply that the father saw the possibility of making millions and knew it was too good an opportunity to miss, and therefore created the whole idea? Well, that's possibly just as likely as anything else. But what about the case of Macaulay Culkin? Culkin had in fact met Michael Jackson after filming Home Alone, and the two were seen in many places together, going to Disneyland, hanging out in the ranch, playing computer games. The fact is, Michael Jackson always considered Macaulay Culkin to be somebody who also grew up under the spotlight as a child. And Macaulay Culkin never accused Michael Jackson of any wrongdoing whatsoever. And in fact, he was also at the trial in 2005, when Michael Jackson was again accused of child sex, but released on all charges. That surely would have been an opportunity for Macaulay Culkin to have then said, if he did in fact know something, to protect all of the other children. But Macaulay Culkin has never done this. The case gets a little bit more interesting when you look at Corey Feldman. Although Corey Feldman is also adamant that nothing ever happened, and he also had a great time with Michael Jackson, he was a little bit more shaken, especially when he saw the Leaving Neverland documentary. At this point, Corey felt that although nothing had happened to him, that didn't mean that it couldn't have happened to other children. And in fact, Jimmy Safechuck and Wade Robson did give very similar, very compelling accounts as to what happened. But why do you think they waited so long to tell anybody in this documentary? Surely if they actually had been abused, they could have done something about it much sooner, and therefore, if other children had been abused, they could have prevented that from happening. But no, this documentary came out a full 10 years after Jackson's death, when of course Michael Jackson wasn't around anyway to answer their complaints. But if they really had wanted to sue Michael Jackson, the best time to have done it would have surely been during his lifetime, when they could have actually put forward their evidence. Now, the most high-profile online person who's come out in support of Michael Jackson has to be Candace Owens. This is somebody who has immense media following online. And if you look at some of her videos, which are very in-depth, she herself claims that Michael Jackson was the victim of an inside job. Effectively, the industry didn't like the fact that he was trying to protect his own career, his own music, his record label, from someone like Tommy Mottola. And also, she felt that Michael Jackson was simply the victim of a far too powerful media that just went out of its way to smear him, ever since probably the accident he had with Pepsi. But if you do want to watch those, they're very good. Candace also goes on to say that Michael Jackson was somebody who simply was too great, but also more likely to be brought down because of it. And in fact, none of this could happen today because there are far too many online journalists who would be able to challenge the press. But that simply wasn't the case in 1993. If you remember the kind of headlines that were coming out, it was just a constant stream of Wacko Jacko, Jacko the paedophile, Jacko the child molester. There was no chance for anybody else to tell another side of the story. I'm glad, although Michael Jackson's no longer around, the people are actually standing up for him and protecting his memory. If you are interested in Michael Jackson, of course, you're going to want to see the upcoming new biopic, which is out in April. You may even be able to catch the West End show if you're in London. But I still believe that he probably didn't do anything like what people accuse him of. And even if he did have children over, it was purely innocent because, as Macaulay has said, he had a big enough bed that was 2 or 3 stories. So if somebody was in his bed, what that actually meant was that child could have been in a second or third bunk or even in a completely separate part of the room. So it doesn't mean that they actually necessarily slept over or had sex in the bed, just that the children were somewhere in that room where Michael Jackson was also sleeping. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you later, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.